From the alley-oops at Keyshaw to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show. We're through a week of free agency. And now that we're a week through free agency, I think we're starting to get a pretty good idea of what the 49ers are going to need in the draft. And that's what I want to talk about on this episode is what do the 49ers need to address? Do they have needs? Is there places they can go just for depth? Get into all that. So that way, when we start getting into mock drafts and start talking 49ers draft, we have an understanding of how they're building this roster and which areas they need to address. And I think that's one of the big things that we need to find out with how the 49ers are handling it. A little bit of, kind of down news today as Jordan Willis went to the Raiders. I think I was hoping, and I think a lot of the 49er fans were hoping that Jordan Willis was going to come back and be a part of that rotation that the 49ers have at DN, because really when you're looking at the 49ers roster, DN seems to be the most glaring depth weakness of any of the spots on the entire team. You have Nick Bosa. He's the best in the business. But then on the other side, you have a young guy like Drake Jackson. Got a lot of upside. I don't think anyone would argue how good Drake Jackson can be. I think the bigger question is, who is Drake Jackson right now? And then behind him, you have Clelin Ferrell. Great, right? A former top 5 pick. He hasn't really lived up to expectations, got a lot of work to do, but you see promise, and we all have so much hope in what Chris Kasarik does with his defensive linemen that we just expect him to be Arden Key or to be Charles Omenihu or Samson Ebukam, but we don't know for sure. But behind them, there's nothing. There is no one. Jordan Willis is gone. Omenihu is gone. Ebukam is gone. So they're going to have to find and address the DN position, and that's one of those ones. Mr. Corey saying right tackle is the biggest need. We're going to get into that as well as we go through this. And how's it going, Donald? Mr. Corey, I'm glad you guys are in chat. Mr. Corey says Jordan Willis for Clelin Ferrell was a steal for the Raiders. It could be. Let's see what happens with Chris Kasarik gets his hands on Clelin Ferrell and see who he becomes. But I think it is a question mark around some of the other guys. And then, yeah, Donald saying, I heard Larry Krueger talk about Niners' interest in Lonnie Johnson. That is true. I've seen that around the Twitter sphere as well. Lonnie Johnson, potentially another secondary piece that the 49ers could add to their roster. I think when you're going through, I started going through and marking down which position groups I thought were biggest need because of players they had. And the first spot I landed was defensive end. And Mr. Corey said it was right tackle. But I think when you look at the defensive ends, it's literally defensive end for this reason. You have 3. 49ers, will usually carry 5 on their game day roster. So they are deficient in 2 defensive ends right now, unless they're planning on moving Eric Armstead outside, which I wouldn't suggest because him and Hargrave on the inside is just absolutely impactful and exactly what the 49ers need moving forward. And they have an abundance of players on the interior defensive line. Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Kalia Davis, Kevin Givens, T.Y. McGill. It is absolutely loaded. But then when you go and you look at the defensive end spot, Drake Jackson, Nick Bosa, right now would be your starters. Clelin Ferrell, the first guy in, and then Alex Barrett. And, Barrett is a guy that's been around the 49ers organization for a long time, but he hasn't really been active in very many games except for 2020, which the entire defensive line was decimated by injury. So I like Alex Barrett. I've always liked him as a practice squad guy that could elevate in a pinch, but I don't think he's the actual depth the 49ers are looking for at the position. So to me, defensive end has to be the number 1 spot in the draft that the 49ers need to address. The good news for the 49ers is that defensive end is plentiful. There are so many very good players that are going to be available for the 49ers in that end of 3 comp pick range all the way through round 7, and even guys that are going to be undrafted free agents. So to me, that's, if you're going to have a draft need, defensive end is that spot. With the way the roster is currently constituted, and I expect the 49ers will bring back Kerry Hyder or somebody of that nature, so that way they have another veteran. But even then, the 49ers could draft up to 3 defensive edge rushers in this draft. There are some very good players, but there are definitely some holes that need to be filled at the defensive end spot. The 49ers need to find players, that could fit. Could they still go the free agent market, get a Kerry Hyder, maybe even get a bigger name? Potentially they could do that. I mean, there's still some very, very good, names out there as potential guys the 49ers could address with free agency. But then you start getting into that money, right? It's a lot cheaper for guys in the draft or low budget available edge rushers. But I mean, look at the names still available on the edge: Bud Dupree, Leonard Floyd, Frank Clark, Robert Quinn, Yannick Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney, Matthew Ioannidis, Ashawn Robinson, Marcus Golden, Akeem Hicks, Calais Campbell. I mean, it's the who's who of players. Justin Houston is still out there. Carlos Dunlap, Dante Fowler. I mean, you name it, they're available right now. And the 49ers could definitely go that way. But what's the realistic, chances that they do that? I don't know if that is a really good, opportunity for the 49ers, because they are trying to keep it as low cost as possible. And those guys all cost. And so far, those names haven't been willing to move for less money. So these guys could easily be under contract. We've seen what Ebukam got at close to $9 million a year. Charles Omenihu got $10 million a year. So that is a market that the 49ers weren't willing to go for those players. Would they be willing to go, over $10 million for Leonard Floyd, 30-year-old, edge rusher, or Bud Dupree, 30 years old? Like, these guys are in their, kind of their 30 range. Jadeveon Clowney's there. Matthew Ioannidis is almost there. Marcus Golden's 32. He had 11 sacks. So would they be willing to do that? I don't know. The cheaper option is definitely to go draft. And there's a lot of players, in the draft that could be available to the 49ers that they could target. And I think that's one of the things that I think the 49ers are going to have to do, is address defensive end in the draft. I don't even think it's a question now. It's just when do they hit it, and who's going to be available when they decide to draft. And as long as the players they're looking for are there, I think they're going to pounce on a bunch of these guys. Mr. Corey says, Ant, would you trade Drake Jackson, a 2024 second-round pick, and a couple of thirds in the draft for Chase Young? As far as Chase Young, I mean, Chase Young's a phenomenal player. He's definitely worthy of the, top 5 pick that he was taken with. I think my question marks around Chase Young would be a couple of things. Number one, he's going into the 4th year of his contract. So what would his contract look like as far as extension? And then second, what is his health like after the big injury that he just came back from? I didn't see the same Chase Young that we had seen before that. Of course, the farther and farther you get away from the injury, the better you're going to be. The explosiveness comes back. The power in the lower half comes back. But I think it's a big question, because if you're trading Drake and a second-round pick, Drake is stayed healthy. He's extremely athletic. To me, I think Chase Young is a better player right now, and I think he is more explosive. He has more talent, but I don't know if that juice is worth the squeeze. Drake, a second-round pick, and a couple of thirds is a lot to give up for Chase Young, who you're going to end up having to pay. You have Drake Jackson for 3 more seasons, that you would be trading Chase Young for potentially 1 year and then his 5th year option if you decide to exercise it. If you made the trade before the Commanders make a decision on the 5th year option, there's rumors they're not going to exercise the 5th year option on Chase Young. So I think there's a lot more going into it than just player for player, Drake Jackson for Chase Young. But I think it's an interesting concept and thought. I don't know if the Commanders will be willing to do that, but that's a lot to give up to get Chase Young. He is worth a lot, but I think the injuries are something I'm definitely concerned with. What's up, Mosquito Killer? How's it going? Welcome to the chat. So defensive end for me is the number 1 draft need for the San Francisco 49ers, because they just don't have any. Besides the top guys, the depth-wise, you don't want Alex Barrett being the next best guy, the 4th guy. Like we said, they could always address it with Kerry Hyder and some of those guys. But Drake, Cleveland Farrell, and then Alex Barrett. So you need to address it there. then where do you go next? Mr. Corey said earlier he thinks his offensive line. I still go tight end, and here's why. The 49ers have been trying to address this tight end room, for a while, but they haven't really been willing to, put any real capital into it. Charlie Warner was a 6th-round pick. Ross Dwelley was undrafted free agent. They haven't really spent a lot of capital. Even George Kittle was a 5th-round pick. So I think the 49ers now are at a point where they need to invest a little bit of capital to go ahead and get a tight end. And they haven't been willing to do it in free agency. They brought Ross Dwelley back. That was announced today. I'm sure it's going to be a very cheap deal. Last year he played on the league minimum. I expect something similar. This is the 49ers doing what they do, making sure they don't have any glaring draft needs when they go to the draft. So that way they're not drafting because of need. They can still take a really good player. And that way, if they have to, they know what they got with Ross Dwelley. So I think the 49ers still need to address the tight end room. There are still really good free agents available. O.J. Howard just went to the Raiders today. But they could go that way, having a number 2 for George Kittle. They could always roll with Dwelley or Charlie Warner on the back end as the 3rd guy, but they need to improve that 2nd guy. But I don't know if they're going to do it in free agency. They haven't been willing to spend the money. Robert Tonyan got a pretty cheap deal to go to the Chicago Bears. So who exactly do the 49ers target? Well, there's tons of guys. The same way edge is plentiful in this draft, so is tight end. So for me, the 49ers going tight end would make a lot of sense, especially with the guys that are going to be available, anywhere from, the 3rd to 7th round. There are players in all those areas that are guys who you could really count on to come in. Would they be able to be a number 1 tight end in the league? I don't know, but that's not what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to come in and be a nice tag team partner for George Kittle. Of course, the one the 49ers fans want to go right to is Sam Laporta. Played at Iowa. Very good. He played good in the slot. He's got a lot of ability in the receiving game. Needs to get a little bit better in the blocking game. But to me, I thought he was somebody that would make a lot of sense for the 49ers. But he probably moved himself up the draft board to not be available. So who's going to be available when the 49ers get on the clock at pick 99? Well, a guy that I really like, Will Mallory, he's going to be there. He's one of my star players out of Miami. He ran a 4.54 at the combine. He's a guy that he needs to get a little bit better with the blocking, but you can see the ability to catch the ball. He's a good receiver. His routes are getting better, but he needs to continue to work on it. But to me, he could be a steady number 2 and an actual threat behind George Kittle. Another one that everyone likes to talk about is Jack Kuntz. Zach Kuntz is from Old Dominion, 6'7". He ran a 4.5 as well. So a lot of speed coming from those 2 tight ends with some ability in the passing game. Those guys are very good. Another guy to mention, Brenton Strange. He's available and looked good. A guy that I'm a huge fan of is Blake Whiteheart out of Wake Forest. So we can see the 49ers go there later in the draft. Those are all possibilities. And it just continues. There are more and more guys throughout this draft. So 49ers going tight end seems to be inevitable. And I think it's one of those positions that they still have need at going through 1 week of free agency. Could they address it? Yes. But there's definitely guys that need to handle it. And what's up, Scott Hill? How's it going? And he says, we need a right tackle. And that's what Mr. Corey was saying as well. It's all about that. Mr. Corey saying Sam Laporta. I love Sam Laporta. I think he's got so much ability coming in from the tight end spot. I think he could be a dynamic force behind George Kittle. I think the 21s and 22 personnels would be fun. The 2 tight ends, that would be great. However, I just think he just tested so well at the combine that combined with what you see on film makes him an early day 2 pick, which means he's probably going to go somewhere in the 2nd round to early 3rd round. I just don't know if the 49ers would be willing to trade up to get a tight end. With the amount of really good tight ends in this draft, I would say they wouldn't. Now, if for some reason Sam Laporta just fell down the board and got within striking distance of the 49ers at 99, like let's say he got to 89, I think the 49ers would be willing to package a couple of picks, move up, and get Sam Laporta and put him with George Kittle. That would be a dynamic force that they could use. So I'm okay with that if it came to that situation. Mr. Corey talking about Chase Young said Chase Young looked explosive against the Niners last season. He flung Trent Williams around a few times. Oh, the strength is there. The ability is there. And he worked with one of the best defensive line coaches over at Ohio State. The technique, the way they play with leverage, Definitely really good. I like a lot of the defensive ends that come out of Ohio State. One of my favorites is Zach Harrison coming out this season. He was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school, 6'5", almost 6'6", with an 87-inch wingspan. Tremendous. If he, tests really well, I think he's going to be one of those guys that's going to go high. But right now, he's ranked in the range where the 49ers would pick, according to a lot of the mock draft simulators and some of the things that I've heard and seen. So to me, Harrison would be somebody I would be interested in that 99 to 102 range if the 49ers end up having him available. Mr. Corey says, what was the 6'7" tight end you talked about, Ant? That is Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion. He's a really, really big tight end. He tested very well at the combine. He ran a 4.5. He jumped out of the building. The dude's got tremendous athletic traits. I think when you watch the film, you definitely don't see that translate all the time, and you also don't see him being very physical in the blocking game. So I think he would have to be more developed. So I've always thought that if the 49ers signed a free agent tight end, that Zach Kuntz would make a lot of sense for them, bringing him in as a third tight end, letting him develop for a year, and then him taking over that tight end 2 role. So far, I don't know if they're going to go that way. They've went Ross Dwelley because they probably are going to draft someone that they hope can step in and play tight end 2 behind George Kittle, hoping to get a tight end 2 that if heaven forbid something happens to Kittle, that guy could step in and get significant snaps. If you're going with a young guy, you have to make sure you give them support like a Charlie Ward over Ross Dwelley just in case. So I don't know for sure which guy it'll be, but I want one of those guys. Mosquito Killer says, yeah, I definitely am excited to try and get another tight end, but we definitely need another edge. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Luckily, with the 49ers having 3 picks from 99 to 102, they have a good range to be able to address several issues. They could get a defensive end. They could get 2 defensive ends. They could get a tight end in that area. They could address safety as well. With the fact that they've loaded up on interior defensive line, that went from being a possible need to not being a need at all. And I think that's something that's nice that the 49ers are doing, the way they're continue to address their holes. So when they get to the draft, they don't have to draft to fill holes. They're drafting to fill depth, and they're drafting for the future, which we've seen them do, especially at the offensive line position. My number 3 positional need for the 49ers in the draft is the offensive line. So Mr. Corey's been calling for it. Mosquito Killer talking about it as well. These are positions the 49ers need to address. And I think that offensive line is definitely one of those. Now, I've seen a lot of people talking about the 49ers, drafting an offensive center. Somebody like Luke Whippler out of Ohio State or somebody like that. I know the 49ers really like drafting offensive tackles. In fact, they've only drafted 1 interior offensive lineman in the entire tenure of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, that being Aaron Banks, a 2nd-round pick for him. Other than that, they have not drafted an interior offensive lineman. They've been willing to sign them as undrafted free agents. That has not been an issue. But when they've been in the draft, they have drafted offensive tackles that they've been willing to move around. It was Daniel Brunskill was a guy they brought in from the AAF, but he was an offensive tackle that they moved inside. Colton McKivitz played some guard for a while. He was an offensive tackle that they moved inside. This is something that they like to do. If you look at what they did last year, Nick Zakel, offensive tackle, they moved inside. Spencer Burford, offensive tackle, they moved inside. This is the way the 49ers go about it. This is the way they address their offensive line by getting big, physical, athletic offensive linemen and then turning them into whatever they need them to be. So the obvious names for the 49ers on the offensive line start with Cody Mock and Matthew Bergeron. The problem is, are those guys going to be available when the 49ers pick at 99? Probably not. Both of those guys are going to go, off the board sometime in the late 2nd round, maybe even mid-2nd round. So Warriors are not going to be able to reach them, which makes it a little bit more interesting when you're going through this draft. And people have been trying to find players that the 49ers could possibly be able to reach. Maybe they're available in the middle of the 3rd round. The 49ers could trade up and get them. So that's why when I'm going through players, I don't always look at these centers or offensive guards because the 49ers haven't been willing to do that. The likelihood are the 49ers are going to draft an offensive tackle because of their athletic ability and move them inside. They've got Jake Brendel now for foreseeable future if they want him. They don't really have to address center anymore. Their guards seem to be figured out, so they are going to go tackle. So I'm sure, I haven't even looked at chat right now because I was having a conversation, but I'm guessing most people want Blake Freeland. That's what Mr. Corey said. We're getting Blake Freeland, which is, I'll be honest, Mr. Corey, I'm going to have some fun with you right now. I'm surprised you like Blake Freeland, considering Blake Freeland is Mike McGlinchey light. That is exactly who he is, except he's not as good in the run game. But the things that he struggles with, the things that he's not great at, are the same things that Mike McGlinchey struggles at. And I was watching Blake Freeland's film, and he's crazy athletic. I really like the things that he can do athletically, the way he's able to get to the second level. Those things are great. His length is fantastic because he's 6'8". He has all that height and ability, a smooth kick slide. Here's the problem. Most defenders can beat him with physicality. Most defenders can beat him going to the inside. He gets out on his edges a little bit on the outside and loses his balance. So to me, I think it's one of those things where Freeland is a solid pick if you're picking him with one of those comp picks. But if you're having to trade up to get him, I know I wouldn't be willing to do it from the film that I've saw of Blake Freeland. So to me, I get the love of Blake Freeland, the athletic ability that everyone sees. He's got a lot of issues with his bending at the waist, and a lot of that's because he's 6'7", and I have a lot of problems with the fact that he's only 304 pounds. He needs to put more weight on. Mike McGlinchey was too light when he weighed that amount, and this guy is taller than Mike McGlinchey. He needs to put more weight on that body. Of course, he can do it, but I don't think Freeland would be the answer in year one. If you draft Blake Freeland, he could be the eventual replacement for Colton McKivitz, but I think Colton McKivitz would beat Blake Freeland out if they went at it at camp. I said it on Twitter, and I'm going to stand behind that. I don't think Freeland can beat Colton McKivitz out in year one. McKivitz is a better run blocker. McKivitz is more stout and can anchor more and has better balance to be able to play the inside move by a defender than Blake Freeland does at this point. Hey, and I might be the only one. I might go out on a limb with it, but that's just what I believe. I just, I'm with you. And Mr. Corey says Freeland isn't a top 10 pick. He's more athletic than McGlinchey. He's more athletic. You're right, but he's not a better offensive lineman. And that to me, he's not somebody that I'm like jumping for joy about right now. I like the player overall, but I like him at a certain area. And what's up, SG? How's it going? I hope you're having a good day. I hope everything is going good. And as far as Trent Sherfield, glad he went to the Bills. Glad he continues to be able to play NFL football and get an opportunity to produce on the field. That's important. So offensive line, I still think they're going to go with a tackle. So if Blake Freeland was available towards the end of the third round and they need to trade up a few picks to get him, I'd be okay with that. But to me, Freeland, I would not trade up into the early third round to get him. I think that there'll be other players that you could address later that you could possibly get that I think, would make more sense, like Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. I think he's a possibility for the 49ers, and they could definitely get him, with one of those comp picks in the third round, or even wait a little bit longer and get a player that I think, definitely fits the system that 49ers want to do. So there are some guys that are going to be available at the offensive line, but you're right, addressing offensive line and getting depth pieces is important for the San Francisco 49ers in this draft. That's why I have it number 3 on the list. But when you look at the 49ers offensive line overall, it's pretty good. The fact that they've kept the core group together. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, and Spencer Burford all were starters last year. We have the one replacement that is going to be Colton McKivitz playing right tackle for Jalen Moore. But they still have Jalen Moore as a backup. They have Nick Zakelj as a backup that they've been developing. Jalen Moore for a couple of years now, Nick Zakelj for 1, Jason Poe for 1. And then they brought in Keith Ishmael as well, who's had some starts in the league, who's now the backup center. So those are things to remember. They've definitely drafted for depth already. So they did a pretty good job of keeping this group together. And I did see something in the chat about postage. I don't know. Let me see if I can go find that again. I missed it a second ago. Something about making an offer for... Oh, there it is. Mr. Corey said, we made an offer towards Ethan Postage. He chose to stay in Cleveland. So, they tried to do something. It didn't work out. But, yeah, I mean, now we're going to be with Jake Brendel. Hey, how's it going, Rich? Good to see you in chat. Glad you came through. SG says his first day of work at Great America is on April 2nd. Can't wait to meet all the coworkers. Well, I hope you have a good time. You'll be right there, right over there in that area by the stadium. So that'll be fun. Mr. Corey says, but I actually like Colton McKivitz, but as a swing tackle. I'm with you. I think that, this is a jump with him starting, but when it comes down to it, you have to have faith in Chris Foerster. The way that Chris Foerster has built this offensive line in the last several years, they've outproduced what anyone thought they were going to be. And then the offensive linemen, it's almost like what Chris Kasarik has done. Those offensive linemen have turned what they've done on the field into solid contracts. It was last year that Tom Compton left after what he did at the end of the season, filling in for Mike McGlinchey, and got a good contract from Denver, more money than the 49ers were willing to pay. And nobody thought Tom Compton was going to get something like that. Laken Tomlinson got top money to go play left guard, and he was originally a trade the 49ers made. Look at what Mike McGlinchey got this year, top tackle, right tackle money to go out there and get his spot. And we see offensive linemen leaving all the time, even depth pieces for the 49ers or guys who are rotational pieces that go out and get good contracts. And I think Chris Foerster gets the most out of these guys. So when they're drafting players, I think they're very high on certain guys. And I think that overall, this wasn't exactly Colton McKivitz wasn't a Chris Foerster guy. He was somebody that was drafted when John Benton was the offensive line coach. So I think when Foerster took over in 2021, I think you kind of seen what happened. They shocked Colton McKivitz by cutting him and not allowing him to make the 53-man roster. But once he put his head down and got to work, you've seen the development. And then in 2021, he was able to come in and help the 49ers produce and get a Week 18 win over the Rams. And then I thought last year when Colton McKivitz came in, he did a lot better. So I want to see the development of Colton McKivitz coming into this season. He's definitely been in the league and experienced the things that he needs to experience. He's not going to be surprised now by anything that happens. He's winning against really good edge rushers, but he's been in the system for a while. So I think there's some continuity there with him working with the guys that he's going to work with. And continuity is huge when it comes to offensive lines and everyone playing together. And then I also want to see what the development of Jalen Moore, Nick Zakelj, and Jason Poe are, because we haven't got to see them. Jalen Moore, of course, struggled mightily against Denver, but in his next opportunity, he did a lot better. He settled in. I think that moment, Monday Night Football, all that was really huge for him, or Sunday Night Football was really huge for him. But he addressed it, and I do want to see how Chris Foerster continues to develop this offensive line, and I do give him a lot of rope and a lot of faith. And what's up, Randy Daytona? How's it going? What's up, Kylie? Kylie's in chat. What's up, Jess? Rini says all of our 11... Sorry, I missed it right here. All of our 11 draft picks are going to be future Hall of Famers. We are good guys. Trust the Niners. The one thing I don't know if they'll be all Hall of Famers. I love the confidence. But I do believe that we will get some gems out of it. The 49ers have figured it out in every single draft how to find a gem that makes a big time impact. And that's why they've went with this comp pick formula that they've went with. Let players leave, replace them with comp picks, and very, very smart undrafted free agents. How many of those undrafted free agents have paid dividends for the 49ers? Emmanuel Mosley, Azeez Al-Shire, just to name a couple, Kevin Givens. These guys have been impactful for the 49ers as undrafted free agents. You can even look on the other side of the ball, and there were guys on that side of the ball that did it as well. So to me, the 49ers do a very good job of drafting players throughout the draft that make an impact. And then they also sign undrafted free agents that do a very good job of stepping up, developing. And now, like this year, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who's an undrafted free agent, is going to have an opportunity to compete after the guaranteed money we just saw him getting. So, and Mr. Corey says Chris Foerster might be this era's Bob McKittrick. Woo, Bob McKittrick was absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite coaches of all time. I just love the way he went about his business, and he always produced. He got one or two first-round picks as a coach, and he developed everybody else. And I think that is something that's awesome. The way they just drafted them, they just drafted those guys to fit the system, and then he was expected to develop them. And I think that's what they do with Foerster. They look for specific traits, and I also think they look ahead. Here you got Nick Zakelj. They probably thought Daniel Brunskill could potentially leave this year. Nick Zakelj is a guy that can play, all five positions. So now you have that. Is he at Daniel Brunskill's level right now? No. Does he need more development? Absolutely. But I think those are things that they can continue to work on. And I like where the 49ers are going with their offensive line. I think that it's young. There's definitely some question marks, but there is continuity with 4 of the 5. And that's hard even during the season, let alone in an offseason like this. What's up, Roberto? How's it going? Says, hey, Ant, I really like the way the Niners have handled free agency. I can't wait to see how they handle the draft. I trust our front office group. I'm with you. I trust them as well. They have definitely earned everyone's trust with the way they've been able to go about it. Did they make some mistakes? Absolutely. Have they learned from those mistakes? Yes. So when they went out in the 2017, they took chances. They tried to get big time players. They traded up. They moved around. They were trying to make an impact early in the draft. And then what they learned was they honed it in. They started looking for certain characteristics as far as personality traits and also how they were doing in school. They also made sure that these guys, after a while, they were worried about certain types of injuries. So the 49ers have definitely honed in on what they need to do to continue to build this roster. And now that they have the formula, they just continue to do it. The question is going to be how many other teams are going to take the 49ers formula and use it. Because, when you start seeing guys go out and get GM jobs like Rand Carthon, they know what that formula is. Now, can they duplicate it exactly? No. They have a different coach. They have a different scheme. So it doesn't mean they're going to draft the same way. But it does give them a basis at which to evaluate players and draft players. So they could ultimately take some of the players the 49ers would target because of those traits. So the 49ers are just going to have to continue to hone in their craft and get guys that fit their system. But I think they can do it. Roberto says, as many running backs as Kyle seems to go through, do you see a third round running back drafted? No, I don't see a third round running back being drafted. I do think there's a tremendous amount of talent in the running back area, but the 49ers, when looking at depth, in fact, I wrote down in my list, I was going through positional need, and then I put some as luxury picks. Luxury picks, one of them is running back, because the 49ers, it would be nothing more than a luxury pick because of who they've got at the running back position. It is absolutely stacked. Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, both of those guys could start on 15. Christian McCaffrey probably on almost every team. Elijah Mitchell could start on 15 teams. Then you got Jordan Mason, who was very impressive in his rookie season. I expect him to take even a bigger step forward, but his 1 foot in the ground, get vertical type of running style fits what Kyle Shanahan wants. Plus, he's a big guy that's hard to bring down. I think Ty Davis-Price is somebody that is going to step up. I don't think we're getting the same things we got with other players. I think he's a guy that's going to stick. I think they're comfortable with these 4 guys in the room, and it's a very impactful room. And just think, one of those guys is not going to be active on game day, so this room is going to be highly competitive. It's going to be very good. I don't think they draft anyone. I would not be shocked, though, to see them go ahead and sign guys in undrafted free agent market to bring in. Of course, you want to have more than 4 running backs going through training camp. You need to make sure you have at least six to get the reps, because if not, you're going to tire these guys out. And I'm sure it's going to be a smaller workload for Christian McCaffrey, and probably even a little bit of a changed workload for Elijah Mitchell during training camp. So Jordan Mason, Ty Davis-Price are probably going to get a lot of the carries. Boy, training camp's going to be a lot of fun this year. I'm really, really excited to see it, because I think it's going to be good. Marvin says Sermon left a lot to be desired, and I think that's what's been found out, right? He didn't play any in Philly either, so I think that's a problem as well. There's lots of free agents. You're right. There are a lot of free agents out there. So I think that running back is a position the 49ers don't really have to attack. So I think the 49ers won't address. I don't think the 49ers are going to address running back. Mr. Corey says Ty Davis-Price could have been Kirby Joseph or Nick Cross. You're right. It could have been a safety. But I don't think the 49ers were really wanting to attack safety in the draft. I think the 49ers, they had Jimmy Ward. They knew they had Talanoa Hufanga. They didn't really have to. So what they did was they signed a veteran player like George Odom that could be a suitable backup. They had Tarvarius Moore, but those 2 guys were big-time special teams guys. When they brought in Gibson, then they knew they didn't have to address it again. So I think the 49ers are okay with safety. Do I expect them to go safety in this draft? I do. I really do. 49ers Classic says the NFL is a copycat league. Other teams will copy the 49ers because of their success. Exactly. And they go and they steal their coaches and their front office personnel, and everyone wants a taste of it. That's the same thing that happened when Bill Walsh was there, and then George Seifert. The coaching staffs went. Mike Holmgren went. Andy Reid from Holmgren staff. These trees just get big. But it was Ray Rose. It was Denny Green all over the league. And they're, even Carmen Policy and Dwight Clark went to Cleveland at one point for huge contracts, because that's what happens when you have success. Everyone wants to have that success as well. So we went through the first three: defensive line, tight end, and O-line. The fourth is safety, and that was what Mr. Corey just brought up in chat. He talked about Kirby Joseph and Nick Cross, and everyone was definitely on that, including me. I thought potentially they could draft a safety last year just in case Jimmy Ward left. They weren't willing to do that. They had other positions that they wanted to address. And you're right, Ty Davis Price, they went there. But there's no guarantee, right, that they were going to get Jordan Mason, or that Jordan Mason was going to turn to that player. Also, you didn't have Christian McCaffrey at the time. You had Jeff Wilson Jr., so you're drafting guys still. It's a different running back room last year compared to this year. Now with safety, you got Hufanga and you got Gibson, and Gibson's here for one more year. Hufanga's going into year 3, so next year, actually, they'll have to make a decision on whether to give Talno Hufanga an extension. So this is a big year for him because he was a 5th-round pick. He only had a 4-year contract, and we're already through 2 years for Hufanga. George Odom, and then they signed Miles Hartsfield, and Hartsfield is either going to be a safety or a nickel corner. I'm thinking he's going to be more in the safety range. I think that's why they're bringing him in, another special teams guy, but is the ability to play in the slot and has started a lot of games in the league. And then they have Taylor Hawkins, and Taylor Hawkins is one of my favorite guys, undrafted out of San Diego State. I said last year I thought he was going to beat out Leon O'Neal. He did. I thought he had a chance to push to make the roster. He pushed. Hawkins is someone I'm extremely high on, and I think he has the opportunity, to make this team this year. So they still could address the depth portion of the safety class, including drafting a safety that could, potentially come in and be a heir apparent to where they could learn under Gibson and learn under Hufanga. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you have the next guy, the guy that can step up and really help your football team. But what do those guys look like in the draft? I think that's the bigger question, is locating the guys that you can, be able to hit in that 99 to 102 range. Are you going to get a guy there that's going to be able to help? Because, some of these guys are really good. You got like a Jamie Robinson from Florida State, and he's, right now kind of pictured in that into 3, but I think he's going to go towards the beginning of the 3rd round. Now, we've seen safeties in the draft over the last several years kind of slow up and fall off. You see the way free agent safeties are getting less and less money in the NFL. It seems like the NFL is going away from the safety position as a high priority, the same way they did with running back. But we've seen the value there kind of fall off. So maybe Jamie Robinson would be able to fall to that area. I love him. Of course, I'm a Florida State fan. Guy's impact player. He makes big time hits. He's a solid tackler. He's somebody that could be available. Dale Skinner, he could be available as well out of Boise State. And with the injury that he had, how much will he slip down the draft board and potentially be available? Jair Brown out of Penn State is a guy that is fun to watch and can make an impact. I think that those are all guys potentially the 49ers could address. And of course, one of my star players that if you have me on Patreon, you can go over and check out is Trey Dean. And if you're looking at measurables, you're not going to see it. He ran a 4.7. It's not going to impress anybody. But when you watch him, he has fluidity in his hips. He's able to turn and run with receivers. He's able to turn and run with tight ends. But he's 6'2", 200 pounds, and he hits very hard. He's a good tackler. I like him a lot, a former corner. So to me, he's a guy that the 49ers could bring in to play the free safety position. He needs to improve in his zone ability. But when you have a guy like Steve Wilkes that coaches the secondary the way that he does, he's a guy that can definitely fit what they're trying to do. And I think also with the amount of blitzing that he does, you could flip them into man, and Trey Dean would be able to handle a lot of the tight ends in this league. And I think that's something the 49ers could definitely be looking forward to. So he's one of the guys that I'm very, very high on in this draft. And what's up, Forktail? How's it going? Says, dang, I'm late. What's up, TCC? How's it going? And Roberto says, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. I love it. I absolutely love that comment. You're right. It is. Imitation is what it's about. And that's what this league is going to try to do. And they're going to try to take out what the 49ers are doing and try to use it to their advantage. all the while doing it your own way, because every single team has a certain spin on it, right? Their coaches are a little bit different. The way they're having to build their rosters is a little bit different. Who's available to them is different. Like you've seen with just the way Mike McDaniel and Robert Saleh have built their rosters entirely different, even though they came from the same organization, the 49ers. Their teams are going to look different, and that's the same what's going to happen with the Houston Texans as well. So to me, it's interesting that the types of things they take and use for themselves and the types they try to do their own way and how that ends up impacting them. Mr. Corey says, we need a second round pick for either an offensive tackle, safety, or tight end. I think there's value for safeties in the third round and the fourth round. I think that'll be fine. I think tight end as well. You could probably get a very, very good tight end in rounds 3 through 5, maybe even 2 if you wanted to go that way, guys with high end ability. Offensive tackle is the one. I think you're right, Mr. Corey. I think if you wanted to hit on a really good offensive tackle in this draft, you need to be in that second round. And I don't know if the 49ers are going to be willing to go up and get someone in that second round. There are very good players, that are going to be up there. So then the questions start being, do you take chances on somebody that maybe is injured? Is that something that you're willing to do? Do you go Andrew Voorhees and you take an offensive guard and then potentially move Burford out in a year or so? I think that's something to think about. But I mean, if you want to get one of those guys, that's going to be one of the better tackles, you're probably going to have to trade up and get him. And I don't know if the 49ers have the juice or want to spend, because next year's draft seems to be a lot better with talent. So to me, if they're willing and they wanted to go up and get a guy, they could go up into that middle second round. And I think that's the location they could get Cody Mock or Matthew Bergeron, who they're huge. I've heard they're huge on out of Syracuse. I don't know if that's the case, but then you got Cody Mock working with Joe Staley, so they're going to have that. To me, both of those guys would make sense for the 49ers, but we'll see. I just don't know if they're going to be willing to jump up into that area. They were willing to trade that pick for Christian McCaffrey. They were willing to make those types of moves, knowing they probably have some sort of a gem. And they found Spencer Burford in the 4th round last year. Could they potentially find another guy in that 3rd round range? I think they could. So maybe that's the way they go. Mr. Corey says, no, leave the Trent Baalke philosophy alone. Well, I mean, I don't like that philosophy in the way that Baalke did, because he did it consistently all the time. But the 49ers were willing to do it this year with Kalia Davis. Kalia Davis got hurt in the combine process, and they were willing to draft him because he was a guy with 3rd round talent. They could get in the 6th round. And then when he came back and practiced last year, they were extremely excited about what they seen on the field. So I don't think it's a science you want to normally take. But for every player that, you kind of have a give and take with. So if you have extreme potential there, you do it. I don't think it's something you want to spend high draft picks on. So you're right. Drafting someone in the 3rd round that has an injury that could potentially develop is a lot more nervous than somebody that you take in a 6th round with a comp pick, which is basically a 7th round pick. So to me, I think you're right. In those situations, you could do that. So I'm good. Rich says, I think so because we don't have many players to make the 53. Yeah, we don't. We're not going to have very many players, to have to make this 53-man roster. Right now, we're trying to fill out a 90 and see who can come up. But I think I read today that the 49ers have 19 of 22 starters from the NFC Championship game coming back. So the 49ers are going to have a full complement of players and talent, and they've added to that with Hargrave. If they could add an edge rusher with a significant amount of ability, either in the draft to go behind Drake or in free agency, I think it could put the 49ers over the top. Twisted Clown with the super chat. What's up, Twisted Clown? Says, all will be warming the bench, package picks. Okay, package the picks and go up. I think that's a possibility. You're right. These guys could be warming the bench, any guys in the draft. But that is one of the ways you build for the future, right? Because you have contracts coming up. Cleveland Farrell, 1-year deal. You're going to have to figure out more edge rushers again. On the interior, as far as defensive line, you have other guys that are on 1-year deals. Kevin Givens is going to be back for 1 year, but then he could be gone. Javon Kinlaw, you're not going to exercise his 5th-year option after this. He could be gone. So there are some places where you need to institute depth for the future. And I think edge rusher and D-line are 2 of those. Also, when you look at the linebacker position, even though I think it's absolutely stout, you're going to have Oren Burks going into the last year of his deal. You're going to have Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. He's in a 1-year deal. To me, you just got guys, that are on those. And I know Marcelino McCurry-Ball, everyone's excited about, but you just have to have more depth in that room. So continuing to draft and get players that can potentially step in is very important. I think the 49ers did that at a high level in the secondary, and I think they've been doing that at the offensive line. I don't think it can be even more clear than Laken Tomlinson leaves. You insert Aaron Banks, you're ready to go. Daniel Brunskill's not ready to go. Spencer Burford steps in. He's ready to go. Can they repeat that with Colton McKivitz stepping in for Mike McGlinchey? If so, it could be very, very impactful. So I kind of like the way they go about it, but I do understand the want to grab a couple of draft picks and trade up. I'm not against that, depending on what player you're going to get. If it's going to be a dynamic player, a player that can help you out right now, I'm all for it. What's up, San Francisco in the house says, what's up, Coach Eto? Eagles fans finna be sick when they see us flexing with Hargrave next season. It definitely going to change some things. I mean, that's the point. He's going to come in and make an impact. You add him to Eric Armstead with Bosa. It's dynamic, and depending on how much Drake Jackson has improved since last year, if he's improved to the levels of potential that he has, it could be lights out. I mean, he had 3 sacks last year. He could even double that. That's more production than you got from Samson Ebukam. I think his question marks are, can he stop the run on first and second? Well, the guy I know that can do that is Cleveland Farrell. So that's good news. The 49ers could obviously start Cleveland Farrell on first and second down, bring in Drake Jackson as a pass rusher if they wanted to. Now, if Drake has improved enough, he's been working with Kasarik, and Kasarik developed Samson Ebukam's ability to set the edge against the run. Then we might be talking about him being a 3-down defender, and if he is, the 49ers were definitely on the right track. And there could still be some low-cost, budget-type moves they can make. At Justin Houston, expect to get like $3 million. The 49ers could splurge and potentially get a guy like that. I don't know if they get one of the big-time guys, but I guess if they felt they could afford it, they would do it. And for me, Parag, I just trust what he does as far as contracts in the front office. So I'd be all willing to do it. And Mr. Corey says Jawan Jennings is gone in 2024 too. Well, Jawan Jennings will be a restricted free agent in 2024. So he's exclusive rights this year. Next year, he would be a restricted free agent because he doesn't have 4 accrued seasons yet. So he cannot be an unrestricted free agent until he has that, because he spent his first year, this drafted season, on the practice squad and then was hurt. He was never on the active roster. So I believe we will have a 2024 with Jawan Jennings. And then after that, you're right, he will potentially get a big contract. They won't be able to afford a big contract for Jennings to go along with Ayuk if they decide to extend him and Deebo Samuel. So there'll be some decisions there. That's why there's some wide receivers in this draft that I like. And the 49ers have, met with a couple of guys, including Nathaniel Tank Dell. They met with other ones as well that I really like. I just went blank on the Ole Miss player. Jonathan Mingo, they met with as well. And I know they were meeting with guys at the pro day. They met with one of the Michigan wide receivers as well. So safety, the number 5 positional need for the 49ers is cornerback. And I mean, I think they've done a good job of address the cornerback position. We talked about it earlier. You've got your starters, Charvarius Ward, Deommodore Lenoir. Then in the slot, it's going to come down to Sam Womack playing against the new signings, the guy they brought in, and Isaiah Oliver. So those guys are probably going to battle it out for the nickel spot. And then you're going to have, a competition on the outsides as well with Ambry Thomas and who's going to be the back of him and Sam Womack on the outside if he is beat out by Isaiah Oliver on the outside. And then we got our guy kind of hiding the same way Taylor Hawkins has been flying under the radar at the safety position. Quantrez Knight, been huge on him since they signed him out of UCLA. He was one of my guys I really loved when I watched this film playing in the slot. I think he's one of those guys that has potential to compete, and I'm excited to see what he does, and whether that's playing nickel corner, which I think he's best suited for, or transitioning into the free safety mode. The fact that he's a hitter, he has great instincts, and they signed Miles Hartsfield. He's not much different as far as body style from Quantrez Knight, but Knight is one of those dudes that he's the first one out there every single day working. He works his butt off. He gets it done. He flashed so much in the practice game that they played last year, the scrimmage games they were playing against Minnesota. To me, Quantrez Knight could be an impact, but I do think the 49ers could continue to add depth at the cornerback position because Ambry Thomas went from being a starter to falling off and being the fifth corner. So you just want to continue to improve the room. And I think the 49ers could look to address depth in that area. I don't think it's a significant need, but it is a need nonetheless that the 49ers could address, even though I don't think that, they really are going into it with a struggle. I think that they could definitely not struggle and go ahead and get a corner somewhere in the draft. It doesn't have to be the top part of the draft that they could really, really count on because it's all about depth. It's bringing someone in to compete with Ambry Thomas. Mosley left, so you do have a little bit of a vacancy there. I've heard people talking Darius Rush. I like Q Blue Kelly from Stanford. I like him a lot. To me, he's a guy that the 49ers could address later in this draft, and I would be very, very good with it. But I think he's got natural instincts, but he's probably going to go in the third round. So if he slips any, the 49ers could definitely get him. And then a guy that the 49ers have met with that I am a huge fan of is Alex Austin, the cornerback out of Oregon State. 6'1", he runs a 4.5. To me, he's somebody that I think the 49ers could definitely put in their system and he could have great success. So he's a guy that I'm high on as well in this draft process. Mr. Corey says, thanks for that explanation, and I forgot he was on the practice squad. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's taken time, Mr. Corey, through the years for me to understand everything that had to happen with the accrued seasons, the exclusive rights free agency, restricted free agency. When it's exclusive rights like this year, it's a done deal. They're coming back to the team. When it gets restricted, it gets a little bit more interesting. I think the 49ers would try to sign him before they ever got to the point where they would need to offer him a tender, the same way they did with Colton McKivitz and Kevin Givens. But I'm guessing he'll want a one-year deal next year because he'll want to be able to go out and be a free agent on the open market and see what his value is because Juwan, even though he loves the team, he's going to want to get paid. And there's probably a team out there, especially Miami, Houston, New York, Tennessee, that would love to get a guy like Juwan Jennings, who's a great blocker and can move the sticks on third down. There was Kendrick Bourne was once that exact staple of person, not as physical as Juwan Jennings, but a third down converter, and he got a huge contract from New England. So I would expect Juwan Jennings to do the same sort of thing. Mr. Corey says, Kinlaw and Ambry Thomas are my only known targets left. And yeah, I mean, and I think, I think we're going to always have a problem as far as like the same way you were talking about Mike McGlinchey equating a top 10 pick to how he played. I think that'll be what's Kinlaw's thing. I mean, I think Kinlaw being the 14th pick overall, people are going to expect him to be a dominant force that dominates play in and play out. And I think, if we can adjust our mindset to what he'll be because of the injuries, do more of a rotational piece behind Hargrave, that can help and be kind of more in tune of what you were getting from Hassan Ridgeway. He's an impactful player that way. More limited snaps, a run stopper who's occasionally going to put pressure on the quarterback. I think if that was the mindset we could change, I think we'd be happy with Kinlaw coming up this next year. With Ambry Thomas, I just don't know why he fell off so much. To me, it didn't make a lot of sense. So, yeah. Marvin says, trade Kinlaw to Jacksonville. Balky likes injured players. He does. He really does. I mean, I don't think the 49ers are going to be trading Javon Kinlaw as much as it makes sense, for them to move on and trade him. I think they like him as a rotational piece. I think they understand what they have. They won't exercise the fifth-year option, but I think they understand what they have with Javon Kinlaw after the knee injuries and such. And if they can use him in that Hassan Ridgeway's, abilities and role, then I think they'll be okay. But I don't know. I don't know exactly, how Kinlaw fits in except for a rotational piece at this point. And I don't think he's in the long-term plans of the 49ers. Porto says, our defense is going to be historically good, guys. Again, I truly believe it. Injuries willing, of course. Yeah. What's up, Lou? How's it going? Thanks for checking in. It says he'll check in later. I appreciate that. When you're looking at the 49ers defense as far as starters, the NFC Championship game, you had Lenore, Gibson, Hufanga, Charvarius Ward. That doesn't change. You had Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw. So where it changes is that your Sam linebacker, it will either be Oren Burks or Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. I know a lot of people have been pushing for Marcelino McCurry-Ball. I won't say he wouldn't. I want to see more from him. But the linebacker position has one change. So secondary, no changes. Changes of the linebacker position. And then as far as the defensive line, Bosa, Armstead starters, Hargrave, upgrade, but he wasn't with us. And then Drake Jackson, he didn't start. In fact, he didn't play in the game. He didn't dress. So there are a few, with 3 adjustments. One of those an upgrade from Hargrave. So really 2 guys that you're adjusting from that you have to see how they can step up in this, overall in this this time off season to see what they could do during the season. Let's see. I wanted to go through a couple of things real quick here with our luxury picks. So if the 49ers are making luxury picks, I picked 4 positions that they were going to be luxury at. Oh, I forgot a need. I forgot quarterback. The 49ers will definitely need to address quarterback, whether that is drafting someone or signing an undrafted free agent, because you like to have 3, usually 4 healthy quarterbacks to get you through the offseason and training camp. And the 49ers are going to have Trey Lance, and they're going to have Sam Darnold, but Brock Purdy won't be available till potentially the end of training camp. They probably need to draft a quarterback or sign 2 undrafted free agent quarterbacks to make sure they have enough bodies to be able to get through the throwing sessions and such during the offseason and training camp. So to me, there's definitely areas the 49ers could target at quarterback. I know it's going to be late. You're not expecting the 49ers to go early on and draft a quarterback, especially with the addition of Sam Darnold. So the usual suspects that people have been talking about have been Stetson Bennett, Clayton Tune, Jake Hayner, Max Duggan. And Duggan I like a lot out of the group. I think he's got a lot of potential. He fits the Kyle Shanahan type of quarterback that Kyle likes to get. And I think that, when I look at it, that's part of the reason that I went with that I like Duggan, is because I think he's, one of those guys that's got a lot of potential. So Duggan, a guy that the 49ers could go with at late in the draft, potentially 6th round on. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, of course, DTR. He's a potential guy the 49ers could go with. I like Tanner Morgan a lot. Tanner Morgan out of Minnesota. There's nothing special about his measurables. He's 6'2". He's 200 pounds. But I like the way he gets the ball out on time. He's got really good accuracy where receivers don't lose any momentum when they catch the football. He's got enough arm to get the ball downfield. To me, Tanner Morgan would be a guy I would be willing to take late in the draft. And if, like, some of the mocks have him going undrafted, if that's the case and he's going to go undrafted, I'd for sure sign him as an undrafted free agent. So to me, he's somebody that makes sense for the 49ers later on in the draft if you're willing to wait and go that route. What's up, Gary? How's it going? Gary's in the house. He says, hey, Ant. Hey, Gary, what's up? So that would be a position that the 49ers could definitely address. Lou says, don't know if you've addressed this, but what is the most important position to move up for? I say O-line, but could be edge. I think you said it. It's those 2 positions. I think there's so many good edge rushers in this draft that potentially you could sit pat and pick up one of those guys, because there are so many guys in this draft that are just really, really good. So if you're looking at edge rushers that could potentially, be in that 49ers, target, you're talking about Will McDonald. Now, he's probably going to go. I mean, there's people saying he could go in the 1st round, but I think he's a 2nd round guy. So if you're trading up, Will McDonald makes sense. Depending on where Zach Harrison is, if Zach Harrison is anywhere near the 3rd round, I'd be willing to go up and get him. Now, if he fell, if he fell to the 49ers comp pick, you just sit there and you wait. When he's 6'6", 275 pounds, can set the edge, but can also get to the quarterback. Felix Uzama and Aduke Uzama from Kansas State is one of my favorite watches. I like him a lot. To me, he would be a guy, if he fell, the 49ers could trade up and get a little bit. But I don't think the 49ers would be willing to go up into the 2nd round. I think it's going to have to be early 3rd round. I think that's the time, when the 49ers could go up and get one of these guys. As far as offensive line, I think you have to. I think that's why offensive line, to me, if they're trading up, makes the most sense, because they could go up and get Cody Mock or Matthew Bergeron or Darnell White. Like, those guys, to me, are the ones that make sense, especially Mock and Bergeron. And they'll probably be somewhere in that late 2nd round, early 3rd round. So if you're going to go up, I would go up to get one of those tackles if you felt like they could be an heir apparent, or even come in and compete with Colton McKivitz. And if that's the case, yeah, I think you go do it. So to me, I'm all about that. Mr. Corey says, we forgot to mention kicker Jake Moody. I think it's going to be, I still think it's going to be Robbie Gould. I think Gould's going to end up coming back for a pretty good deal, because when it comes to the market. There's right now 2 teams that don't have kickers, the 49ers and Rams, and there's 6 veteran kickers out there available. So I think he's lost a little bit of his leverage, and now the 49ers can work out a good contract with them to come back, because Robbie Gould still wants to compete for Super Bowls, and he still wants to try to make the Hall of Fame. And the best way to do that is be making postseason kicks. So to me, it makes sense. I just don't want to spend too much money. Let's see. KDR says, just saw we signed offensive lineman John Feliciano. I did not see that. So that could be some news right there. The 49ers have signed an offensive lineman. But I hadn't seen that. Maybe it happened when I was live. We'll see. Yep, John Feliciano was a former 4th-round pick to the Raiders in 2015. Feliciano only allowed 3 sacks as a center for the Giants throughout his career. He played left guard, center, right guard. He only allowed 8 sacks in his NFL career. That's according to Wayne Breezy's Twitter. So Breezy breaking it down right there. The 49ers have signed O-lineman John Feliciano to a 1-year deal, according to Kim Jones Sports. So Feliciano coming in, and I mean, right away when you hear that he's played left guard, guard, and right guard, what's the first thing that you think? Oh, we've got some more, backup potential on the inside. The 49ers making more depth moves, a guy that can take over the Daniel Brunskill role. Okay, we have an injury at guard. Here comes Feliciano. We have an injury at center. Here comes Feliciano. I think this is a smart move by the 49ers overall. And thank you to KNDR for coming through with the Feliciano news. I really like that. Orcall says, didn't Gay sign cheap kind of already? No, he got record-breaking money. He got absolutely record-breaking money. He got like $5.8 million to kick in the NFL. It was crazy. And Lou's a second-day draft party this year. I don't know, Lou. I don't think I'm going to. Just because the 49ers aren't picking till the end of the 3rd round. They have no second-round pick. So I'm probably not going to do a draft party this year. I had so much fun last year, though. So maybe, we could get together or something and watch the draft together. That could be a lot of fun. So maybe we'll talk about that over the next couple of weeks and see if everyone wants to meet up and just watch it together and not do like an actual show from there, but watch it. We'll see. Marvin says, Ant, did you watch Jake Haener play? He played well this year. Tough guy. Yeah, I like Jake Haener overall. I thought Jake Haener competes at a high level. He's got a pretty good arm, pretty consistent with accuracy. I do have some injury concerns with Jake Haener as far as his hip goes. But to me, I think Jake Haener's a guy that, would make sense for the 49ers in later rounds. The question is, where's he going to fall? I think once he starts getting to the end of the 5th, early 6th round, I think the 49ers could potentially be willing to go with a Haener. I think the problem with drafting one of these guys too high is the odds of them making the roster is not good. So I think, you've got Darnold, you've got Trey Lance, and then Brock Purdy will be available at some point. Where does that make Jake Haener fit? So you have to think that one of the guys that they draft, not only does he have to be pretty good, but he also has to be able to get to the practice squad. So, I mean, could Haener be that guy? I mean, he could. I like Haener, and if the 49ers win Haener, I would have no problems with that. I think he's a tough competitor who really works his butt off, and I think he would fit in the 49ers quarterback room for sure. What's up, Joel? How's it going? Joel in the house. Ask how everyone's doing. We're all doing good. We're talking 49ers draft, which is absolutely fun to talk about because it's rapidly approaching now, guys. We're getting there. We're getting to the draft. It's going to be no time before we're there. But I'm going to check out right now on the hour mark. Thanks, everyone, so much for coming through to watch the 49ers draft needs. I'll be doing Ant's mock draft 1.0 pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. But thanks, everyone, for coming through, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. If you have the opportunity, like the video, subscribe, do all of that stuff. I really appreciate it. It goes to help the channel, and yeah, I had a great conversation with everyone. So until next time, have a good one, stay safe, and remember the right way is always the 49ers.